What happens when a cookbook gets devoured? Not by eager chefs following its recipes, but by a hungry mouse, or perhaps a rat? This book, once a trusted companion in the kitchen, has fallen victim to some uninvited diners. Its edges are chewed, its pages bear the scars of tiny teeth, and yet it remains a treasure trove of culinary history, filled with recipes and traditions that tell the story of a time, a place, and a people. Food is so much more than fuel for the body. It's nourishment for the soul. It binds families together, celebrates milestones, and carries with it the flavors of identity and culture. Cookbooks like this one are not just functional guides, they are cultural artifacts capturing the ways people lived, loved, and came together around the table. To let a book like this crumble away would mean losing a piece of that history, a piece of our collective identity. Join me as we save a slice of history, one that's been both loved and quite literally eaten. Between some of the pages, there's a loose sheet of paper that has never been attached to the book. I place it in a layer of blotter paper and set it aside for now. I begin the process by thoroughly dry cleaning the book to remove any loose dirt and dust that may have accumulated over time. This step is crucial as it prepares the book for more detailed conservation work. Using a soft, fine-bristled brush, I meticulously sweep away dust from between the pages and across their surfaces, ensuring that even the tightest spaces are gently cleaned. When it comes to the exterior of the book, I use a smoke sponge as well. The sponge is particularly effective at lifting dirt that is more firmly embedded into the surface. By gently patting and rubbing the smoke sponge over the surface, I can effectively remove stubborn grime without causing any damage to the material underneath. I repaired tears in the book's pages using small patches of Japanese koso paper and wheat starch paste, applying the patches to both sides of each tear. It's important that the patches are torn, not cut, as the long fibers along the edges provide better adhesion. The patched pages are left to dry with a sheet of non-woven polyester directly against the repair and a piece of blotter paper on top. While the repair dries, I can still turn the pages, but whenever the book is left still, I ensure there's weight on top to prevent the repairs from warping. It might look like I'm working in a somewhat random order, but there's a method to the madness. I work on the pages in sections, starting in the middle of each section and working outward. The book block is made up of sections, each consisting of 4 leaves of paper folded in the middle. These sections are sewn together through their folds, with each section forming 8 pages in the book. Does that make sense? This is relevant because who or whatever handled the book before caused damage to the outermost layers of paper along the spine, leaving the outer leaves of these sections at risk of splitting along the fold. The innermost leaves are also fragile, but by repairing those first I can stabilize them, making it easier to treat the outer leaves without worrying about further damage to the rest of the section. The patches can be carefully slid between the leaves and under the sewing thread. Once everything is aligned, I adhere the patches in place. Just like the other tears, the folds are also reinforced from both sides. These are extremely vulnerable areas, so it's crucial to ensure the repairs provide optimal strength. There are a few corners in the book block that need to be filled. I do this using a heavier paper that I've dyed to match the original one. I cut the paper to shape so it fits precisely and add patches of Japanese paper to it. Once the patches have dried on the fill-in, I attach it to the page and reinforce it from the back as well, treating it just like a regular tear. There are only 2 pages inside the book that require filling, and the damage doesn't resemble the other issues found in the book. I'm quite certain that the damage to these pages was caused by much larger and far worse pests, the kind known as humans. They're completely unpredictable. When all the tears have been patched and all the holes filled, I trim them with a scalpel. For the tears, I use a small piece of cardboard placed between the pages to prevent cutting into the pages underneath. For the fills, I also use a piece of cardboard as a guide to ensure straight edges. For patches located in the folds, I can't insert a piece of cardboard as a backing. There simply isn't enough space. However, by using a relatively sharp scalpel, I can glide the blade along the edge of the paper, cutting only the Japanese paper. It takes some practice to find the right angle to cut just the Japanese paper, but it's a very satisfying feeling when it works perfectly. I removed the loose sewing threads from the spine to get them out of the way. I've concluded that I need to resew the book. At first, I've thought I would only need to do it in certain places, but I've come to realize that many of the sewing threads are broken and there doesn't seem to be any consistent pattern to it, so I've decided to resew the entire book. I sew the book with linen thread, making sure to use only the original sewing holes. Additionally, I sew over a new piece of cloth, which will later help secure the book block firmly to the covers. The sewing goes from the spine to the center of each of the sections I mentioned earlier. To make the process easier, I've added lots of small notes in the book so I can find the right places while I work. I'm not removing the original sewing. In some places it's loose and will likely fall off eventually, but the new sewing will hold the book together when that happens. If I were to start tampering with the original sewing, I would just risk damaging something else in the process. I glue the spine with wheat starch paste to hold the sewing and cloth in place. I also make sure to secure the ends of the sewing thread to the spine so they don't end up sticking out in odd places. As you might have noticed, several corners of the covers are missing. I fill these gaps with acid-free cardboard. The covers themselves are made of board, which is essentially multiple layers of paper glued together. To fill the missing areas, I first have to split the board into as many layers as possible in the damaged area. This allows me to insert new cardboard pieces between the layers and adhere them in place. I also split the cardboard I'm using for the fills into thin layers. The end of the cardboard that will be inserted into the cover is thinned further to create a smooth and natural transition between the two materials. I deliberately split a thick piece of board instead of using thinner pieces, because the rough surface of the split layers adheres better. I start by placing my new cardboard pieces into the splits in the cover to ensure they fit properly, and to check if the thickness of the new piece is correct or if I need to add or remove layers. Once I'm satisfied with the fit, I adhere the cardboard pieces into place using wheat starch paste. This is a relatively thin paste that I apply with a knife, making it easier to reach deep into the splits and ensuring the paste penetrates fully, binding all the layers of the split board together again. When the corners are drying, I place small pieces of non-woven polyester between the covers and the binding material to prevent them from sticking together, something I want to avoid at this stage. I also add a layer of non-woven polyester and a layer of blotter paper on the outside, along with some pieces of board and a few clamps to ensure the corners dry flat and neat. When it's time to trim the corners, I first sketch their shape to ensure they look natural. Once I'm satisfied with the outline, I cut them with a utility knife. The original covers might not be perfectly straight, so it's more important for the fillings to match the covers than to align perfectly with a ruler. And now it's starting to look like a book again. Now that the covers have been filled, I can probably reattach the book block to them. This is done using the cloth I sewed onto the book block earlier. The cloth needs to be adhered between the covers and the end papers. First, I trim it so it fits neatly and lies flat. Then I apply wheat starch paste between the layers. I make sure to use enough paste so it seeps through the cloth, ensuring it adheres securely to both the covers and the end papers. There are a few small areas where I still don't want the adhesive to stick, but I've placed nonwoven polyester there to prevent it. On the outside, I add another layer of nonwoven polyester and a layer of blotter paper, and the entire assembly is held together with clamps while it dries. With the book structure in place, we can begin focusing on the binding. I start by filling in one of the corners using a piece of cloth I've trimmed to shape and wheat starch paste. I adhered first to the outside, applying enough adhesive for it to seep through the cloth, ensuring it bonds the cloth to the cover while also consolidating the original binding material. Once the exterior is secured, I fold the corner inward to match the other three. On the inside, I place a few pieces of nonwoven polyester between the layers during drying, as I don't want to adhere the end paper just yet. Additionally, I layer nonwoven polyester and blotter paper on both sides, and the corner is held in place with clamps while the filling dries. The binding material on the spine is also filled with cloth, and I insert a hollow back made of acid-free cardboard. I first coat the cloth with wheat starch paste and place the hollow back in the center, giving it a moment to adhere. The cloth with the hollow back is then positioned on the book with the hollow back facing the book's spine, and the cloth is adhered to the covers. At the head and tail, the cloth is folded around the covers and the hollow back, and then adhered to the inside. I have no way of knowing whether the book originally had a hollow back, but it will benefit the book's structure, so I decided to add one. The original binding material is adhered on top of the filling material at the same time, also using wheat starch paste. To prevent unintended areas from sticking together, I insert nonwoven polyester under the hollow back and in the folds of the end papers. I also wrap nonwoven polyester and blotter paper around the spine, and the assembly is left to dry with clamps securing the sides. At the corner, the end paper is filled with paper similar to what I used for the torn corners inside the book block, and it is also adhered with wheat starch paste. I apply adhesive to the cover, place the fill onto the original end paper, and once I'm satisfied with its alignment, I adhere the end paper on top. Naturally, this is left to dry under a layer of nonwoven polyester followed by blotter paper. I also add a few pieces of board and some weight bags on top to ensure it dries without warping. The folds in the end papers are the final areas that need to be stabilized, and I do this with pieces of Japanese paper. I use only one piece of paper for each of these repairs to avoid overlap. The patch is coated with wheat starch paste, placed in the fold, and carefully brushed into position. I place a piece of nonwoven polyester and a piece of blotter paper in the fold, and then close the book until it dries. Finally, the repairs can be carefully trimmed with a scalpel. The dried fillings in the binding need to be retouched, and I do this using watercolor. I apply the watercolors in layers, as the colors change slightly as they dry. Because of this, it's impossible to know exactly how the result will look until the paint is fully dry. This can sometimes cause a bit of a confidence crisis. While working, I might think it's looking great, only to return an hour later and wonder how I could have been satisfied with something that now seems completely off. I'm using a relatively small brush, and it might seem a bit odd for such a large area. But this seemingly clumsy approach actually helps create a more natural unevenness in the color application. If I were to create a perfectly even color layer, it would look strange, off in a way that's hard to pinpoint. This technique helps me avoid that to a large extent. We are almost finished, but there's one small loose end to tie up. Do you remember the loose sheet of paper that was inside the book? It certainly can't just be left sitting on my shelf. This sheet will be treated just like all the other pages in the book. First, I dry clean it using both a brush and a smoke sponge. Next, I stabilize all the tears. As before, I use pieces of Japanese koso paper and wheat starch paste, stabilizing the tears from both sides, and the repairs are left to dry between layers of nonwoven polyester and blotter paper, with weights on top. Once everything is dry, the repairs are carefully trimmed as well. To protect the sheet in the future, I've made a custom pocket from acid-free paper, sized precisely to fit this particular sheet. It will be stored inside the book again, ensuring it doesn't get lost. With this conservation project now complete, this cookbook is ready to continue its journey as a cherished piece of history. It's more than just a collection of recipes. It's a reflection of culture, history, and identity, a tangible reminder of how food has always brought people together. Each repair, each thoughtful restoration step was taken with care to preserve its authenticity and ensure its survival. The nibbled corners, the repaired pages, and even the loose sheet now safely housed remind us of the life this book has lived and the value it holds beyond its physical form. Now, this once damaged cookbook can return to the hands that cherish it, carrying with it the stories, flavors, and memories of the past. Its pages and binding are ready to endure for years to come, protecting the recipes and memories they hold.